Okay. Good morning.
Hi.
Were they still showing the old links for formation?
Yes, and I freaked out. And then I can't keep this screen up, the big screen up, and then have the meeting going on at the same time.
Right.
So I have it, but it's but I minimized it. But all I'll have to do is go up and make it full screen, and I think that's going to work.
I have it in case we need it. Maybe both of us will be able to pull it. It's funny though how sometimes it doesn't. Rarely for me. And usually that's been inside a class. I don't know if that makes a difference. So but most of the time it's fine. It's been fine here, I think. So
have you started the meet? Have you started?
Yes, we're recording. We're recording right now.
Okay. Oh.
We're recording. It does it automatically now. It's set that way. So we are recording.
So watch your language.
So watch your language, Bill said, yes.
Well, I'm just seeing you, and then I'm seeing this launch meeting screen. So I'm looking around to try and figure out. You're
in, you're fine. Maybe it's your view. I hear somebody.
Okay, I'm having a hard time here.
I can admit them if you want me to.
Okay. Oh man. Let's see.
Good morning. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
How are you?
Oh, I got it back on. Oh, good.
Morning.
Trying to get the COVID vaccine is a problem.
Really? Do they not come? I guess they don't come there to where you are. You have to go out to get it.
Yeah, I went to, the information is conflicting and confusing. I went to the Civic Center because they said yesterday evening they would be open till 7. Wrong.
Uh-oh. I know they'll be open Tuesday, Jane.
Yes, I'm going to try again.
We might be going on Tuesday.
Have you had yours?
We're going to. We kind of barely qualify.
Just barely there, huh?
I went last Monday and there wasn't anybody there. I mean, I just walked in.
Oh, wonderful.
It was great. And I'm not sure why, but it was, I think mid-morning, mid-afternoon.
Were you at entrance 3?
Yes. I don't know what that is. Oh. Playing the polka.
Wake us up this morning. Yeah.
Jared singing, polka playing. Very exciting.
I've heard though it's a real smooth operation, that you don't have to wait too long at the Civic Center. So,
well, it took me a while to find entrance 3, and then they, then it said go to the public health entrance, and by then it was dark. So I'm going to try Tuesday.
This is Dick Ford. I went a couple weeks ago, right after it started. It took me 2.5 hours. I got there right at 9:15.
Yeah.
I never seen so many old people in a wheelchair in my whole life. Finally dawned on me, I'm one of them.
So you're not in a wheelchair though, are you?
No, not in a wheelchair, but I'm one of the old people. So
well, I am too.
It took me 2.5 hours. So that evening I was reading Facebook, and one of my buddies showed up there at 3 o'clock, and he was in and out in 45 minutes. So
oh my God.
So when you're dealing with a bunch of old people like us, you got to go late in the afternoon while they're taking naps, not early in the morning when they're up running.
Thanks for the tip. Thank you for the tip.
And then I saw yesterday a friend of mine posted, he got his 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think if you're going to go, wait late in the afternoon when all the old people are gone.
I don't know. I got in Tuesday, in and out in about 45 minutes.
What time did you go?
I went about 1 o'clock.
That's nap time.
Yeah, right.
So early afternoon nap time is ideal.
That's a good idea.
But you know, I think that Amarillo's done really well with getting their vaccine out, because I in other parts of the state that are, you know, still waiting for things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we've done remarkably well. I think
it's amazing, I think. I love it.
We really have. We're in New Mexico this weekend, and we had dinner with a couple of friends, and both of which are qualified under Texas definition of 1B, and they can't even get a shot in New Mexico. They don't know. It's incredible. You can in New Mexico, you got to go online and reserve a shot.
Really?
With a computer. So if
that's
you're not
true in a lot of states, I think. Yeah.
So if you're not a computer person and this and that and the other, or you're working, you just can't drop in and get a shot. And so I think we're doing some checking, but I believe our Texas rules, and maybe y'all can tell me, I don't remember, when you check in, did you have to be a resident of Texas, or you just have to meet the 1B definition?
When I checked in, no one even asked me any question whatsoever. I went down in the early days. My doctor sent me down to the Civic Center. We waited about 4 hours then, because the lines were like all the way around the Civic Center.
Right.
And nobody asked us anything. I never got asked if I was a resident or anything. I just filled out their form when I got there, and I got.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked, one of Holly's good buddies just moved over to Santa Fe within the last month. And I've told her she just needs to come to Amarillo tomorrow, or Tuesday rather, and get a shot.
Yeah, right. She wouldn't be registered as a resident of Santa Fe yet anyway. So
no, she hadn't changed her driver's license. But even if she did, she's got another friend over here whose mother's 80 some odd years old and can't get her a shot. But if they showed up in Amarillo, you think that I need to do some checking tomorrow. But do you think that she could get her shot?
I bet she could. For one thing, they just want to get the vaccines out and not waste any.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who's much younger who got a call. He said, "We've got to get shots in people's arms. Come on down," and he did. You know, several weeks ago.
Ginger had a little video on yesterday or the day before, talking about the whole process, and she said, "We don't ask you any questions. We don't ask you whether you're a legal resident." I think she was talking about those people that are undocumented, but right. I think that they're just wanting people to come.
Get the shot.
So an 80-year-old woman from New Mexico, we feel she could probably walk right in and get her shot then.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We know of people from Colorado who came down to Amarillo to get their shot.
Specifically to get their shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a concern that, there was a period when they were afraid some of them were going to go bad. They were trying to get them out before their expiration date. And so they were just calling in anybody who wanted to come in, which was a wonderful thing, I think.
Well, good. Well, the 80-year-old woman is daughter is Holly's friend, who's also in the healthcare industry. So she should be able to get her shot as well.
Right. So tell them to come on over.
I think we will.
I don't know why it's doing this.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that we're doing that much better than New Mexico. Why would you require someone to get on the line? If you're an 80-year-old woman in a nursing home, how much computer IT abilities do you have to go register and get and make an appointment?
I imagine if they're in a nursing home, they'll take the vaccines there.
Oh, she's not in a nursing home, but she's 80 years old. She's not in a nursing home, but she's 80 years old.
while Amarillo is doing exceptionally well, the entire state of Texas, compared to the other 50 states, has got one of the highest percentage of vaccines that have been allocated actually already in arms than just about any other state.
But it's not. It didn't move over.
For once we're ahead of things.
I know.
That's what I was thinking.
You know why, don't you?
Yeah, for once it's good to be a red state.
Well,
Well, I'm glad that we're up there in Amarillo. That's really good to
proud of us.
Yeah, my mom's still waiting in Alabama. She said it's just healthcare professionals where she is right now. She hasn't gotten one yet.
Well, I have a friend in New York and they can't find anything out, but I think they're going to roll that out pretty strenuously real soon. But when I talked with her last week, they had none of the doctors knew when they were getting vaccines.
Now that's what's so frustrating. No one knows when or how many.
That's the case. My dad is 90 years old, living in a retirement community in Florida, and he doesn't know when he's going to get his.
I understand why it's not running smoothly because there's so many conflicting.
Well, I think they left it up to the states to come up with the plan. So I think it's our good state that has the good plan.
Well,
I think the city had a good plan, and the state has followed it. Is from what I've heard.
Yeah,
interesting. When I got my shot, I was talking to my little nurse.
I got you registered.
And I asked her. I said, "Now, where are you from?" And she was from somewhere in Louisiana. I said, "Well, how you end up over here?" She says, "Well, the company I work for is under contract. I don't know if it's Homeland Security or whatever, but they were here under contract. So it wasn't just local nurses. I'm just curious how, if all the cities are having contracts like that, or if it's just Amarillo because of our significant amount of cases. I don't know. It was just kind of interesting.
We're regional. We're a regional hospital.
Father Jared is in the house.
I talked to the director of the Panhandle Regional Planning Authority Council about that because their numbers weren't matching up with the hospitalization rate, but he explained there's like 14 buses over the United Artists Theater that transport those nurses back and forth, and he has 1,400 nurses brought in between Lubbock and Amarillo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it had to do with the hospitalization rate.
Okay, Father Jared is now with us, and if you guys would mute, we can listen to him.
Let me turn up my volume here so I can hear everybody a little better, because this one, as I mentioned last week, this will be more of a conversation, kind of a walkthrough. Good to see y'all, by the way. Glad we could be together. I see Dick Ford there, and I heard him talking when I first logged on. You tell Holly she had a lot of guts reading that passage from Corinthians this morning.
Leave this reading. I showed it to him and I'm like, look at this reading I have to do. This is terrible.
She was so glad you dodged it.
Oh, that's great. Oh, man. Well, let's open up with a word of prayer and then we'll jump in. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
O God, in this life, grant us knowledge of your truth, and in the life to come, peace everlasting. Amen. All right. Well, there's a couple things I want to point out, and then a couple of folks I want to just kind of mention and bring in a conversation this morning. The first, if you were part of this last week, you saw this journal I held up, but in case you weren't, maybe this is your first time to join us, I don't know. But, this is just something I recommended folks to get. You don't have to get. It's a gratitude journal, and all through the journal, it's kind of accompanied with some quotes from Brother David Steindl-Rast, who has done a lot of work in gratitude. He's a Trappist monk here in the United States, originally Austrian by birth, but a wise soul. So just wanted to point that out again. And he's got some other writings and stuff too, many of which are about gratitude. So feel free to Amazon or look into some of his work. Two folks reached out to me. There seemed to be a good response to this gratitude series, and I'm very thankful for that. And several of you have been very kind. And then two in particular reached out and really, for me, enriched what we're talking about because of what they brought up. And the first was Deacon Mildred. And Deacon Mildred, are you on here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, as many of you know, Deacon Mildred, a lot of her ministry is with hospice patients. So people who are on that threshold of life and death. And, you know, Mildred brought out in conversation this week, past week, about the importance of lament in relationship to gratitude. And I just wanted to give Mildred just a brief second to just kind of speak to that real quick, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and I'm sorry my camera is off, but I'm in an office that is in kind of destructive mode because we had a leak nearby. So I, in my own life and in the lives of especially hospice patients that are not just at the natural end of a long life, I've noticed that in order to authentically reach gratitude, there needs to be also some honest lament. And I look at Psalm 13 as a good example of that. It starts, I can almost see the psalmist with his fist raised to God in anger and despair. And 4 verses later, he's come to some hope and some trust and some praise. My own experience is that it sometimes takes a lot more than 4 verses of true lament and honest anger and despair and other difficult emotions. And for hospice patients who are, you know, people of faith who quickly come to say, well, you know, we're okay. God will take care of us. And they're you know, it's a husband who's 40 years old and leaving children behind. And I'm just always careful to mention to them that we can be honest with God about the difficult emotions, and that in fact is how we can come to an authentic place of trust and hope, which I think is related to gratitude.
Yeah. Thank you, Deacon Mildred. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those words. And I mean, when she was sharing that with me on the phone, I just thought that everybody should hear this as well, because that's absolutely true. And if you kind of remember last week, talking about that gratitude and practicing gratefulness isn't a denial of the suffering in your life or in other people's lives or the world. Rather, it's a discipline and it's a path that we put ourselves on. And we often have to walk through those dark places. So I appreciate Mildred speaking those, and I appreciate her ministry. That's, as all ministries are, it's a calling. Not everybody has the gifts that are able to sit with people in hospice care, and Mildred has those gifts. So thanks, Mildred. The other person I wanted to put the spotlight on, if she doesn't mind, I did give her a heads up, is Susan Mulligan, who shared with me a really wonderful email. And I don't want to put words in Susan's mouth, but they did speak to me of kind of the relationship between worthiness and gratitude after being the recipient of a tremendous gift. So I'll just, Susan, if you don't mind just taking a couple of minutes just to kind of speak to that for the benefit of all of us.
Sure. Well, the subject line on my email to Father Jared was the troubling side of gratitude. I feel that there's a burden when you're very, very grateful. And I struggle with that now. The young man who was my lung donor was 18 years old. I was 54 when I got his perfect lungs. You know, I've done great, and I truly am grateful every minute, really. I was very touched last week when Kay said, told that story about the man who was hospitalized. And he said, I never thought to be grateful to thank God for being able to breathe. The fact is I'm grateful every minute for being able to breathe. So my problem is not being grateful enough. It's finding a way to express it and to try to live with the survivor guilt, if you will. So I try my very best to do as much good as I can. It just never feels like enough. You know, I wish I could discover the cure for the common cold or something, and then I'd feel like it was all right. And really, this isn't about me. I only brought it up because it occurred to me that we're all in the same boat one way or another. The need around us right now, the fact that I have groceries here in my kitchen and a warm place to sleep every night. Mm-hmm. We all feel that debt. And the biggest example is Jesus's gift to us. You know, a perfect man gave his life, a whole bunch of imperfect morons who don't know what to do with it a lot of the time. So I just work on that. And Father Jared had some very helpful comments back to me. He said, think about the idea that in reality, everything in our world is a gift. And the idea of worthiness is not the point. Just accept the gift. And if you do want to express it, let it bubble out of you. Use that ebullience that I love that word that he used last week. It'll keep coming if you just pour it out. Do all the good you can and be grateful. The end.
Or the beginning, one of the two. Yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah, and just to embarrass you a little bit more, I mean, the work that Susan does with transplant patients and recovering is a beautiful work. And I told her I got the image from everything she does to give back, to say thanks, to show gratitude, is that image of the Trinitarian life that we talked about last week, that overwhelming sense of gratitude pouring out of you and then it coming back. And so I appreciate Susan. All right. Well, let's jump in. As I mentioned, that last week was more teachy, quote unquote. This week's going to be more of a meandering, and I hope we can kind of get through all of it, but if not, that's okay. And this week we're going to be talking about belonging. And so there's going to be some points where, I just ask a question, or we just pause after hearing a quote read or something like that. And I want to hear your thoughts, and I want to hear what resonates with you or what challenges you, and encourage y'all to share that with the group. I know in this size of group, we're bound to have plenty of introverts. And being an introvert myself, I dare not hassle you into speaking. But I do want to say that many times those introverts have something that would be enriching to share. So if it's right on the tip of your tongue, I encourage you to share it. So, all right. So we're talking about belonging and how belonging relates to a deeper sense of gratitude and gratefulness in our lives. And it's belonging, finding ourselves in the household of creation and community. And let's go ahead, Margie or Susan, could we screen share the handout? And we'll just go ahead and jump in with a question. And I'll ask this and then, be quiet, whoever wants to speak. You can do it. Where or when did you sense that you belonged? Where or when did you sense that you belonged? Is there kind of a vivid experience in your memory? And y'all just jump in.
I could jump in.
Okay.
I had a real enlightening thing in midlife when I learned about concept of boundary spanner, because I'd always felt like I was kind of on the edge of things, and that if you really belonged, that you were in the middle of the core of a group, and learned finally that people who work on that sort of thing in social science have identified that there are people who are like hubs of groups and really put all of their everything into one thing. But then there's folks like me who are interested in several things. And so we actually have a role in a belonging type role in being able to connect to different things that are going on. And really, really made me feel a whole lot better about myself.
Yeah. It takes all different shapes, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the bottom line of, I think, that comment is that there's more than one kind of belonging. It's not necessarily that you're part of the core group of one specific thing.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the chance.
Yeah. How about we hear from one other person? Where did you feel like you belonged? When did you sense that you belonged?
So I guess in childhood, really, I grew up in the mountains of California, and I was always an odd, introverted, book study kind of gal. And my happiness was coming home from school and grabbing an apple in a backpack and heading off up the mountain, And I distinctly remember one particular experience in a circle of pines where I'd kind of sat down to quietly munch and maybe start to pick up I think it was probably a Chronicles of Narnia book, because I was deeply enamored of them at the age of third grade. And I suddenly, in the silence there, in the stillness, just became aware that there wasn't any stillness, that entirely surrounding me, there were critters crawling underneath those pine needles I was sitting on, and there were birds in the trees, and I could hear splashing coming out of the stream nearby. And I became aware that I was just part of this incredible, tumultuous, joyous, ongoing, everyday life that I didn't always notice. And I got that sense that both that I was small, but I was part of something that was enormous and wonderful. And it was something that encompassed all of us. And I find when I start to get a little bit separated or unhappy about something, my happiest place is to be outside and feel that brush of wind on my cheek and know that there is life moving all around, and that's the part of which I belong.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, Kay. Thank you for sharing that. And you're touching on such great words and wise words. You're touching on some things here that I think will resonate with what you just said here in a bit. Thanks for sharing.
Jared, could I add one?
Sure, Jim.
I'm just thinking back. I love the word belonging, and yet I don't think about it very often. It seems like, and I'm not sure how many years ago it was when there was a theme in our stewardship campaign at St. Andrews, where the message was, I believe, something like St. Andrews is where I belong. And that really was a profound impact on just hearing that, and it just was penetrating and profound and very powerful, and felt very true. And I felt an immense gratitude for that. So it was just in having that be communicated at that time in that way was, I really had that experience.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Jim. And as I've been here, the past several months, just gradually kind of hearing different people's stories, St. Andrews has definitely been a place where previously the folks didn't feel like they belonged, especially when it relates to a community of faith. They found that they belonged here. So I think that it's a wonderful and important word to use. Thanks for pointing that out, Jim.
I'll add to that. I had become very dissatisfied with the church that I belonged to for decades. And I wandered for several years before coming in to St. Andrews. And the first time I came in, I felt like I was at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've enriched that home with your presence here, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Richard Rohr says, the core of every religious tradition is the mystical tradition. And mysticism is the experience of limitless belonging. Rohr likes to use this language, limitless belonging. And when he talks about mystery, he says mystery isn't something we can never understand. He said mystery is something we can endlessly understand, which I think relates to what he's getting at here. This idea of limitless and endlessness. There's something in the life of our faith, in our life with God, that we live into this limitless belonging. And I think we pick up on some of that, and we see some of that in the life of Jesus. And I called it here, the paradox of homeless belonging. When we look at the life of Jesus and reflect upon it, we see a young man who really, even though he came from a hometown, as was mentioned in the sermon this morning, of Nazareth, he spent the great part of his public life and ministry without a home. Birds have nests, foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. The world has hated me and they will hate you. The world has despised me and they will despise you. I mean, he lived much of his life without, kind of a traditional way that we would understand home. He was a homeless, itinerant rabbi. And yet he had with him and people who encountered him undoubtedly experienced that this is a man who knows he belongs to God, to other people, to the Torah, to the way of God, which is what he called people to, which that's the paradox of Jesus, is this man who absolutely belonged and found people who didn't belong and allowed them a space to where they could belong. And yet he didn't really have a home in the way we understand it. T.S. Eliot in the Four Quartets speaks of an experience of belonging. Music heard so deeply that it isn't heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. And David Steindl-Rast talks about this. He brings out T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, several different books at several different times. And David Steindl-Rast says, you're the music. That means you vibrate with that music. And even though you might just be thinking of some flute music or piano music that you listen to, it's the music of the universe that you are vibrating to. It is the music to which the whole cosmic dance dances and that flows through you. And that's your religious moment. And in that moment, you know that you are one with all. You are the music while the music lasts, simply that. So let's just pause there and thinking about the ministry and life of Jesus and thinking about that David Steindl-Rast quote there. Are there any words or images that come to y'all's minds? Anything that...
It reminds me of St. Paul, actually, in Ephesians. St. Paul always used the term mysterion for what we call sacrament, right? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the Greek correctly, but and so, in Ephesians, I think it's chapter 1, maybe around verse 9 or 10 somewhere. He says that he has made known to us the mystery of his will as a plan for the fullness of time to gather up all things in him, things in heaven and things on earth. And I always thought of that as St. Paul kind of telling us about the free and loving plan of God, a plan only God knows, which is for the salvation of all things created by and loved by God. And it seemed to me that there's an intimation that we are only able to have that revealed to us, that plan, as we're able to perceive that mysterion, the mystery of this free, wheeling, wild, loving plan to bring all things into fullness. And we are, but we're not aware of it until somehow some individual note captures our attention and then draws us fully and immerses us and makes us a part of the symphony that's always going on around us.
Great, thanks, Kay.
So one of the things that as this has been going on, I've been thinking about. I look at almost everything is from a natural systems perspective, and the thing about the way the natural world works, and this is equally true of us, is that we unfold from the inside. It's a continually unfolding story. And so belonging actually comes our being longing to be more than it is, which is a constant. And once I started seeing things from that perspective, then yes, I belong on the path that I'm on, whether it feels comfortable or not, you know. Mm-hmm. And that keeps unfolding and growing in different ways and doing what it does. But that's the way of all life. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah. Beautiful.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Ever since being in elementary school, my father, this is before TV, we would sit outside and he would point out the various stars and the constellations of the universe. And for some reason, I have always felt part of that universe, how complex and wonderful and beautiful it is. And here I am, I'm part of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane. You are part of it.
Well, this is more related to music, but my first true interaction with the pipe organ was in college in this beautiful chapel that was circular, and a lot of the pipes were in the center and you could sit right underneath the pipes.
Oh, wow.
And one of the organ people, one of the kids learning it, was up there playing a toccata and fugue, and I laid down on the bench and it was all encompassing. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Hard to find the words. Yeah. Thanks, Marietta. Yeah. And I'm several of you talked about kind of these experiences, and they were very much related to our senses, your senses. You were taking something in. You know, Kay talked about being on the forest floor. Marietta talked about, you know, just the vibration of the pipe organ, hearing, you know, the piece being played. And Steindl-Rast talks a lot about the importance of our senses and the gifts that our senses bring to belonging. And he says, if we neglect what goes beyond our senses, we sink below animals. But if we deny being animals and neglect or reject our senses, we clip the very wings on which we are meant to rise to higher spheres. Unless we claim our dual citizenship and are at home with both angels and beasts, we become alienated from both, alienated from what is truly human. We become, in Christopher Fry's apt image, half-witted angels strapped to the backs of mules. I just love that last quote that he quotes Fry, half-witted angels strapped to the backs of mules. But I liked how he talked about, you know, if we deny our senses, and to me, this is about paying attention. If we are both at home with angels and beasts. And I'm wondering, especially, you know, one of the gifts, I grew up in Dallas, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure growing up to the animal world, if you can say. I didn't have that kind of relationship. One of the things I've loved living in West Texas for so many years now the Panhandle, there's some similar cultural values there, is connection, to creation through ranching and farming, and people. And I have encountered people who have this, are at home with angels and beasts, I guess you could say. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody on the Zoom call today who can speak to that a little more, and how that's maybe formed you, your connection, whether it be with cattle or sheep or just farming or whatever.
I see Mother Joe's on the line. She certainly could.
Yeah. She may be hiding out.
You know, I just don't think there's any way you can help pull a calf or watch a calf be born and that's really my primary experience with husbandry, is helping, you know, PJ with the heifers when we lived on the ranch. And you just can't see that miracle unfold without being overwhelmed with joy.
Absolutely.
And even in the scary times, like, you know, when I was 7 months pregnant, we had a bunch of heifers, and I swear we had to pull every single one of the calves that year. We never used that bull again. And I was thinking, you know, I'm not sure I'm looking forward to giving birth at this point. I don't think I want anyone pulling one of these things out of me. But even then, there's just a miracle that occurs, and there's an immediate, normally, almost always, an immediate connection between that mother and that child that's never been seen before, and the tenderness that occurs and the shakiness of those first moments as a new being tries to make sense of the world around them. And it's all about the senses. It's all about the mystery of where this life comes from in this hidden womb. And, you know, you have to believe that we are belonging to something that's greater than us and that desires life and desires connection. I'm getting lost. Sorry, I'll stop.
No, well, there's a lot to get lost in. That's a part of it.
That reminds me so much of the Psalm today. You know, how we knit together in our mother's womb. So
yeah. I think that was Susan. Was that Susan?
Father Jared?
Yes.
Dick McKay. Susan Milligan's story today makes me want to share with everybody why Dick McKay never has a bad day.
Okay.
It's a story about Phil Berry, who's an orthopedic surgeon in Dallas, who contracted hepatitis from a needle stick in the operating room. And eventually that essentially destroyed his liver. He was about 2 weeks away from dying when a 35-year-old mother of two daughters had a brain bleed, a Berry aneurysm, and was brain dead. They donated her organs, and Phil Berry got a liver transplant. After he got over that, he became president of the Texas Orthopedic Association, and then later president of the Texas Medical Association. And that year, the theory or the motto for Texas Medical Association was the Live and Then Give program. When he tells his story, he talks about the things he would have missed had he not gotten that transplant. And they included his daughters graduating from high school, walking his daughters down the aisle, and other things. And then he ends it by saying, just remember, Phil Berry never has a bad day. And from then on, I thought, I don't have to have a near-death experience to be grateful for every single day that's a gift from God.
Mm-hmm.
Dick McKay never has a bad day.
Thank you for sharing that, Dick. And you're absolutely right. You don't have to have that. But, you know, and I think hearing the stories of others who have, I think awakens us to how precious our life is. I appreciate you sharing that. Plus, Dick McKay never has a bad day, rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It's kind of nice. Got a ring to it. Thanks, Dick.
My pleasure.
Well, I wanted to kind of talk about all this, you know, belonging limitless belonging, you know, we hear belonging. I think Jackie spoke to it earlier and others have touched on it. It doesn't just mean belong to people, even though that's a very big part of it. I wanted to kind of set the stage about this idea of belonging to the household of creation, that we're all connected, beasts and angels and all the little creepy crawly things on the ground. And you guys are speaking to that so beautifully and wonderfully. So I think we can move on and start talking about the most challenging and difficult of those animals, which would be the human being. There's early Celtic model of evangelism. And by Celtic, I mean, I don't want to assume most of you know, I think a lot of you do. I'm talking about those early Irish and Scottish monks that had a very different model of spiritual formation and evangelism that looked different in some ways than the Roman model, which was predominant on the continent of Europe. For so many years, you had this little island of Ireland that kind of saw its own blossoming and renaissance of spirituality and Christianity. And it took some things that weren't entirely different from the Roman model, but definitely were Celtic in their way. And there's a book, and I'll hold it up. I think there's a different edition now. This is a little bit older copy, but it's called The Celtic Way of Evangelism. And this Celtic stuff is important to me. It's something that's been formative for me in my own journey. And maybe for some of you too. I know me and Mama Joe share this in common. But the dominant Roman model to evangelize people, to bring people into the church, was to present them with the doctrine, right? Demand a decision, obviously, oftentimes demand at sword point or spear point, or put people in a politically dire situation to where if they didn't convert, it would be bad for them and their families and their tribe or whoever. And then you're brought into the fellowship. So here's the doctrine. Do you believe this? Make your decision. And if you do, then you're one of us. Now that's grossly oversimplifying, but that's basically kind of the ebb and flow. And it took different shapes and forms. And you can look through history and see that happen time and time again when church and empire were just like this, right? Well, what was happening in Ireland and the west of Scotland and in northern England as those Irish and Celtic monks made their way up and over and down is a different kind of model, even monastic model, where it wasn't a secluded monastery. It was something in the middle of a community. And they invited people to set up their artisan tents and booths, and they brought people into the monastery and they taught them the classic languages and the classic texts and scripture and all these things. It was much more incarnational, and I think something more akin to what we are inheritors of in the Anglican tradition, Episcopal tradition. But the Celtic model was you bring people into fellowship and you bring people into conversation and you allow them to be a part of the community. And then after a while, it's more of an invitation. More of an invitation to commitment, more of an invitation to consider maybe this Jesus person is worth following. I mean, we kind of get a speck of that in today's gospel reading where Nathaniel's going off about this Jesus from Nazareth, nothing good can happen. And what do his friends just say? Well, come and see. They didn't lie out, well, here's how he embodies everything that the law and the prophets told us about. They just said, Nathaniel, just come and see for yourself. And that's very much closely akin to that early Celtic model of evangelism. It was creating the community, allowing people inside the community, mixing with them through conversation and shared ministry. And then it's the come and see, right? Then it's the invitation. What do you think about this Jesus that we've been talking about? What do you think about what we're doing here? So you see the very different, and it's all about, and this is what George Hunter, who used to teach mission and evangelism at Asbury in Kentucky, which is a Methodist seminary. But he says it's so important for us to realize belonging comes before believing. Belonging comes before believing. And that's been an important mantra in my ministry, and something I've tried to embody the different places I've served. And I hear time and time again, like Jim Witten shared a few minutes ago, that's something that has been experienced by many people here at St. Andrews. that this was a place where they knew they belonged. And for some, maybe not all, maybe people already brought belief with them, but they sure do need a sense of belonging. But there have been others who have said, I couldn't get on with this belief thing until I sensed that belonging thing. And so I'm very interested in honoring that culture here at St. Andrews, and then finding more and more creative ways to invite people into that sense of belonging before belief ever becomes a part of the conversation. So let's just pause there. Is anybody else, I mean, when you hear that kind of idea of evangelism, Roman and Celtic, I mean, has that been part of anybody's story yourself, that sense of belonging coming before belief? Or I just want to hear, or if there's something else that resonated with you in there. Let's just pause and hear from folks.
This is Margie. I just wanted to add that's psychologically sound, that belonging is a human need. It's on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we need to survive. We need to belong. That's that's a need we have.
Thank you, Margie. That's so, you're right on. I didn't even think about Maslow's hierarchy. That's great. Great connection.
You know, you talk about belonging. For me, I've always been a square peg in a round hole. But being a musician, the first place I usually belong when I get to a church is a choir, because that's where I feel like that's a place I belong. There's people that think like me. We're all kind of crazy musicians. And then, you know, it kind of branched, for me, being at St. Andrews, then it branched out to other people. But like being on the breakfast teams, you know, sometimes for some of us, it's hard to find those little niches, even in the big church, where we really belong. And so music for me has always been that kind of place where I belong. But I can also speak to the Celtic part. My maiden name is Craig, which is pretty Scottish. And I've taught on Celtic spirituality a couple of times. One of the things I was going to say to you about belonging is Celts feel like God is present in all creation, that there is the Spirit of God in all creation. And when I extrapolate that and thinking about that, if the Spirit of God is in all creation, then I'm connected to everything through God's Spirit.
Yeah. Thank you, Edie.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit about this. I came into the Episcopal Church in San Antonio, a church that in many ways is similar to St. Andrews. And when I came in, I was an agnostic, a searching agnostic by that point. But and I felt very accepted there, and that was really helpful. And I see that same kind of attitude at St. Andrews of acceptance and wanting people to belong. And because of that, recently in hospice, I was talking with a very young couple in their 30s, and after the husband died, I was talking to the wife on the phone, and she had told me before that she was an agnostic, and she talked about how she really hoped there was something good for her husband, and she had been Catholic, and she had noticed that I wasn't pushy and that kind of thing, and she asked me about what my religious tradition is. I don't share that unless people ask me usually. And so I talked to her a little bit about the Episcopal Church, and she said, I know about it, that it has some similar ritual to the Catholic Church, but it seems different in some ways. And I said, yeah, and one of the ways is, you can come in as an agnostic like I did, and it's okay. Nobody's going to be bothered by that. And it felt good to be able to be part of a tradition like that, and to be able to give someone an option like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mildred. That's great.
I have one thing. I won't be able to say it probably without getting a little teary, but my belonging is with Mother Joe. Back in Lubbock, when Ronnie and I were, I don't know, pretty newly married, but he was away playing baseball and I was there, and it was a rough time. And I had no idea she even knew my name. Saw her at a restaurant at lunch, and she, I was upset about school, and I got a letter in the mail from her addressed to me, and I had no idea. And then I had my first 2 children there. She baptized the first one and then moved here with Father Mann, and then we came and so belonged again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love you, Tamara.
I
just want to say that right up front. I just adore you and I miss you. I want to loop back a little bit to the beginning of our conversation with Mildred's lamenting, and how lamentation has to come before gratitude. My experience with St. Andrews is a history of intermittent belonging. And when I first moved to the Panhandle in 1984, I was living in Panhandle, Texas, which was something I had never imagined would happen in my life. It was not exactly where I expected to come to from Cambridge, England. And I remember coming to visit St. Andrews on Sunday mornings, and I kept it up for quite a while because that worship was important to me. But it was not the place then that it is now. I don't know how many times I stood in that narthex and just kind of hoped someone would welcome this introvert, but no one really ever did. And I eventually just stopped coming. And I didn't come back to St. Andrews until my son was a preschooler. So gosh, almost 10 years later. And the mother of one of his friends made a personal invitation to me to come and join them. And I didn't really even realize at the time that she was a priest. So that was Liz Parker. And, I was kind of uncertain, but she invited me to come and join some folks and kind of join a program that they were doing with young mothers. I was a formation for Catechesis of Good Shepherd. And I found a bunch of other people with similar interests, loved our children, wanted them to have faith, fell in love with exploring the same mysteries with them, and really fell into a ministry that shaped the entire rest of my life. And it was shortly after that point that our church burned. And there was enormous lamentation, of course. And people will tell you that was a time of ferocity of some members of the church turning against one another, but I think that's a natural part of grief. I don't think that says anything about the individual characteristics of the people involved. And what really came out of that were stronger voices. And I always remember David Stidham, standing up and saying, we need to stop lamenting and trying to remake the building of the church as it was before. What we really need to do is just start having coffee with each other and finding a place where we can sit down and visit about our children and about our beliefs and about our hopes for them. And what he was asking for was a parish hall. So out of that lamentation came a real sense of gratitude for what made us a church together, those connections of community. And it was with the beginning of that parish hall experience that, the monks saying, come on in and see what it's all about, that the new St. Andrews that we all love so much emerged, that fellowship of human beings and the love that we have for each other and the hospitable nature of the church, which is the polar opposite of what I first experienced in my, almost year's worth of coming in 1984, early 85. So belonging at St. Andrews comes because we take the moment to stop and invite people in and to really get to know them as human beings and welcome them for the gifts they bring. And I don't think it was possible for us until we went through that lamentation and realized what was really the most important thing in our lives as members of the body of Christ.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I think both of you just touched on something that's crucial to when we're talking about belonging, and we talked about belonging to the household of creation and how we're connected even on that organic deep level to what is going on in creation. I think when belonging happens within human beings, within human systems and communities of faith and that kind of thing, is when we embody the hospitality and the generativity and the interconnectedness of creation. When we ourselves recognize that we belong to this, not only do we belong to this, but we can actually practice the same thing. I think Mary Eminy has pointed that out a couple of times. When people do that in other people's lives, whether it be someone approaching you in the narthex or a letter in the mail, we embody that limitless belonging. We model that for other people. And that's crucial to gratitude.
Father Jared, can I just point something out? One of the things that has been a pleasure for me with belonging is being part of the open and affirming congregations, being at different things, and having people in the LGBTQA community say, really? You mean there are churches we can go to that we feel a sense of belonging? And it's been so rewarding to be part of that group and say, yes, there are churches, including ours, that you can go to and be a part of us.
That's right. Absolutely.
I just wanted to kind of add a little bit to Kay's. This is Kay Kennedy. I wanted to add a little bit to Kay's remarks about how she felt when she first came to St. Andrews. We moved from San Antonio from Christ Church, which I loved. And my husband was Catholic, so we didn't go to the same church. So the first time I went to St. Andrews and came home, he said, well, how was church? And I just burst into tears. And he said, I've never asked anybody that question. And they just cried. So it was indeed a very, very different church than it is now. And for that, I'm truly grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Good deal. I love those stories. Well, let's come to a close here in this last quote, again from David Steindl-Rast. There's no longer any doubt in my mind that I belong to this earth household, in which each member belongs to all others, bugs to beavers, black-eyed Susans to black holes, quarks to quails, lightning to fireflies, humans to hyenas and hummus. To say yes to this limitless mutual belonging is love. Those who say God is love mean this kind of love, this great yes to belonging. And I love that phrase, limitless mutual belonging. So I'm going to end with this question, and this is a question to hang, not to answer now, but just to kind of take with you through the week and into today. Is there a place in your life where belonging may await, but you're finding it difficult to say yes? To say yes to that limitless mutual belonging. Is there a place in your life where belonging may await, but you're finding it difficult to say yes? And how will you say yes today? So y'all take those two questions with you into the week, and maybe something will come from those. And if not, that's okay. But I hope that us talking about belonging today, belonging to the household of creation, and how that informs how we can belong to one another in the household of faith in our community. I hope it's been helpful in how that may deepen our gratitude for the world that we've been born into, for the gifts that we have, even in difficult times, and for one another. So many of your stories had other people involved in it. And so I hope it's deepened our gratitude a little bit today. So that's all I had prepared for today. Is Mama Joe still on the call?
I'm right here.
Well, your name came up a couple of times. Why don't you close us in prayer? Would you mind doing that?
I would love to. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for the gift of belonging. We thank you for the teaching of the Celtic Church that brought people in so that they would belong long before they knew what they were belonging to, except the family of God. We thank you for this place that we live in, where we have the opportunity to to see the earth and to smell the earth and to feel the wind and to know God's love is in all of those things. And we thank you especially for St. Andrews and for Jared Howes and the gifts that he brings to us that scratch our surfaces and make us have deep thoughts, that bring us around and say, what? Wait, I have to think about that. Thank you, Lord, for all of those things. And thank you for this precious, precious congregation. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mama Jo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see y'all.
Thanks.
Y'all have a great day.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck getting your shots.
Father Jared.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Father Jared.
Yes.
Since you've given us a homework assignment, can you print it out?
Say it again. Since I've given you a homework assignment, what?
Can you print it out?
Or send the quotes that you used this morning with the questions.
There should be an attachment. Margie, I'll let you speak to that real quick.
We did. I'll see if you're on our email list, Chuck.
Okay.
But we did send the attachment with this handout that we shared today around, but I'll make sure you get that.
Yes, because I haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll make sure.
And there, if it's homework that you're considering, just know that there's no grading, just limitless A's to go along with our limitless belonging. Hey. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
So precious.
The